The wind blew gently across the dry plains of the refugee camp. Tents flapped weakly. Dust floated in the air, coating everything in a pale gray layer. People moved slowly, tired and thin, their eyes hollow with hunger and fear. Inside one of the older tents, a small alien girl sat cross-legged on the ground. She was different. Her skin was a light lavender color, but her eyes, bright silver with human-like pupils, shined with something more. She held an old photograph in her tiny hands. The picture was wrinkled, torn on the edges, and covered in smudges. But the face, in it, was still clear. A human man. Dark hair, strong jaw, a kind smile. The girl stared at it like it was magic. Her mother sat nearby, mending an old blanket. Her name was Sarah, an alien woman once known for her healing hands. Now she was just another forgotten soul hiding from the past. The little girl whispered, "Is he real?" Sarah stopped sewing. She looked at her daughter and nodded slowly. "Yes, my heart. He is real." "Is he my father?" the girl asked, again softer this time. Sarah walked over, knelt down, and gently cupped her daughter's face. "He is. And one day, I'll show you more than just this picture. I'll show you him." Outside, a loud horn sounded. A supply ship had landed, near the edge of the camp. People rushed out of their tents hoping for food, medicine, or even clean water. But Sarah stood still, eyes wide. She had heard a name whispered in the crowd. Jake. Her body froze. Jake. That name stabbed through her like a blade and wrapped around her like a warm coat all at once. She rose slowly, clutched the photo in her hand, and stepped out of the tent. At the landing site, a tall human man stepped off the ship. He wore dusty armor and carried a tool bag. His face was older than in the picture, tired eyes, a few scars. But the smile, it was the same. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was him. After all these years, after all the silence and hiding, he was standing there, alive and just steps away. She felt weak, dizzy. The girl tugged on her arm. "Mama, is that him?" Sarah didn't answer. She pulled the child close and turned away. "Not yet," she whispered. "Not today." Jake walked through the camp, handing out small packs of supplies. He didn't notice the pair of silver eyes watching him from the shadows. He didn't know that someone nearby was holding a photo of him. He didn't remember her face. Not yet. Years ago, he had been on a mission on a faraway world, caught in a sudden war. He had been injured, trapped under rubble. A local alien woman saved him, nursed him, hid him, gave him shelter. He left after the war, never knowing she had carried something from him through a child. Later that night, back in the tent, the girl asked again, "Why don't you talk to him?" Sarah didn't answer at first, then she said, "Because I don't know if he remembers me, and I don't know if he'll want us." The girl hugged her mother tightly. "But he's kind. Look at the picture. Look at his eyes." Sarah looked at the photo once more. Her fingers brushed over his smile. "I hope you're right," she whispered. She placed the photo under the girl's blanket, kissed her forehead, and blew out the small lantern. But outside the tent, Sarah sat all night, awake, watching, waiting. Elsewhere, in the camp, Jake lay in a borrowed cot staring up at the ceiling. For some reason, he felt uneasy, like eyes were on him. He pulled out an old necklace from his pocket. A simple silver piece with a broken charm. He didn't know why he still kept it. It had been given to him by an alien woman during the war. Her name... what was it? He couldn't remember. But her face sometimes came in his dreams. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was near her again. In the morning, Sarah stood outside her tent with her daughter beside her. She held the photo close to her heart. She watched as Jake walked past again, helping an elder with water. He still didn't notice her. Not yet, but soon she would tell him everything, the truth, the child, and the day she saved his life. The morning sun rose slowly over the dusty hills, casting a golden light on the refugee camp. Life began again with quiet steps, soft voices, and the rumble of tired machines. But one man stood out among the crowd. Jake wore a tool belt and a patched-up coat. He moved with purpose, checking pipes, wiring solar panels, fixing water filters. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his voice was calm, like someone who had seen too much but still chose to help. To most in the camp, he was just another supply man, a human who fixed things and didn't ask questions. But not to Sarah. She watched him from behind a curtain made of old cloth, her daughter hidden beside her. Her heart pounded with every step Jake took. His voice, his face, even the way he wiped sweat from his brow, it was all still the same. The little girl tugged her arm. "Why won't you speak to him?" Sarah knelt. "Because when I do, nothing stays the same after that." The girl frowned. "But he should know." "Yes," Sarah whispered. "He should." Jake crouched near a broken water tank, tightening bolts. A young alien boy stood beside him, holding tools. "You fix fast," the boy said. Jake smiled. "I used to fix starships. Water tanks are easy." "You used to be a soldier?" Jake paused. "A long time ago." "You look sad." Jake chuckled dryly. "That's because I've seen too much." He finished the last bolt and stood up. "Let's get this running." As he walked toward the power switch, a glimmer caught his eye. A child, half hidden behind a tent flap. Lavender skin, silver eyes. His hand stopped midair. Something about that face, those eyes. He blinked and the child was gone. That night, Jake sat by the fire with the camp leader, an older woman named Maya. "You've been quiet," Maya said, sipping broth. Jake nodded. "Saw a kid today. Thought she looked familiar." Maya watched him carefully. "This camp has many children, all of them with lost stories." Jake didn't speak. "Maybe," Maya said softly. "Some stories are waiting to find their ending." Jake gave a weak smile, but inside, something stirred. A memory, a face he hadn't seen in years. A woman, dark eyes, strong voice, warm hands on his bleeding chest. He shook his head. Probably nothing. But deep down he knew that was a lie. Back in her tent, Sarah held the photo in her hands again. Her daughter had fallen asleep, curled, beside her with one hand resting gently on the picture. She thought of the night she found Jake half buried in fire rubble, his body broken, breathing shallow. She had dragged him to shelter, treated his wounds, kept him hidden for 2 weeks. He had smiled at her, and for a few short nights, she had let herself believe they could have something more. But then the human soldiers came, and Jake left. He never knew she was carrying his child. The next day, Jake passed near Sarah's tent again. This time, the little girl wasn't hidden. She stood outside, holding a dusty cloth doll. He slowed. She looked up. Those silver eyes. He smiled softly. "Hey there." She stared, frozen. Jake crouched to her level. "What's your name?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came. She clutched the doll tighter and turned, running back inside the tent. Jake stood there, confused. That child, something in her face, it felt like looking into a mirror from long ago. Inside, Sarah hugged her daughter. "You shouldn't have." "I wanted to say hello," the girl whispered. "I think he knew." His face changed. Sarah nodded slowly. "Yes, he felt it. He just doesn't understand yet." "Will he?" her daughter asked. Sarah took a shaky breath. "Soon." Later that evening, Jake sat alone, staring at an old worn necklace he never took off. It had once belonged to a woman, an alien woman who saved him during the war. He had promised to return, but war didn't wait, and time washed things away. Still, that face haunted his dreams, and now, that little girl, why did her eyes look so much like his own? Jake stood up suddenly. He walked through the camp, past the tents, toward the edge of the field where the broken fences met the horizon, and then he saw her, Sarah. She was standing alone, holding the same photo. His photo. Jake froze. The world fell silent around him. "Sarah," he said. Her eyes widened. Her lips trembled. She stepped forward, holding the photo toward him. "You didn't remember me. But I never forgot you." Jake stared at the picture in her hand, then at the child peeking from behind her. His voice cracked. "Is she?" Sarah nodded. "She's yours?" Jake didn't speak. He stood there, frozen, like time had stopped. The picture in Sarah's hand shook. Her eyes glistened, but she held his gaze. The little girl stood quietly behind her mother, peeking out, clutching her doll. Jake's heart thudded hard in his chest. "How long?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Sarah took a breath. "She's 8. Jake looked down. 8. The math hit him like a wave. That was the same year he was stranded during the border war, the same year he met an alien woman in the hills who hid him, healed him, and let him go. His voice cracked. "You never told me." "I couldn't," Sarah said quickly, stepping forward. "When your soldiers came, I hid. If they saw me with a child, your child, they would have taken her. Or worse." Jake looked at the girl again. She didn't look scared. She looked curious and familiar. Sarah continued, her voice soft and full of pain. "I kept her safe. I raised her, alone. Every night I showed her your picture, told her your name. I thought maybe you'd come back. You never did." Jake looked away, shame burning his chest. "I didn't know." "I know," she whispered. They sat in silence later that night under the stars. The little girl had fallen asleep in Sarah's arms. Jake stared at the sky. "I didn't forget you. I thought I dreamed you. The war messed up my mind. I didn't even know if that place was real anymore." "It was real," Sarah said, quietly. "You were real." He turned toward her. "Why didn't you tell someone? Contact me?" Sarah shook her head. "No one listens to people like me. I'm just another refugee, a number on a list. Besides, you were a soldier. Gone, back to Earth maybe. I thought if I tried to find you, they'd find her." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" Sarah hesitated. "She's different, not just her eyes. There's more." Jake leaned forward. "What do you mean by more?" Sarah looked down at her sleeping daughter. "Sometimes, when she cries, things shake, machines short out, and she learns so fast she sees things before they happen. It frightens the others, so I keep her hidden." Jake stared at the child. "She's part human, and part me," Sarah added. "She's not a mistake. She's a miracle. But she's not safe here. Not anymore." The next morning, Jake woke early. He walked alone through the camp, his mind racing. A daughter. His daughter. He still couldn't believe it. His whole life had changed overnight. He wasn't just a fixer now, not just a wanderer. Someone was depending on him, someone with silver eyes and a gentle smile. He passed a group of traders and bounty scouts near the edge of the camp. They were laughing, talking loudly. "Some kind of hybrid kid, I heard," one of them said. "Seen her myself, looks half human, DNA like that. Could fetch thousands." Jake stopped cold. Another voice spoke, gruff and low. "Boss Krez wants her. Says she's rare. Wants to sell her off-world. We're keeping watch." Jake's blood turned to ice. They were talking about his daughter. He rushed back to Sarah's tent. She was already awake, packing quickly. She looked up, her face pale. "You heard them." Jake nodded. "They know." She grabbed her daughter and pulled her cloak tighter. "We have to leave tonight." Jake stopped her. "You won't get far alone. Let me help." Sarah looked at him unsure. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted. "She's mine. I won't lose her before I even get to know her." Sarah's eyes softened. Do you remember her name? She asked. Jake hesitated. Sarah smiled slightly. I named her Hope. Jake nodded. Then let's make sure Hope survives. That night, the camp was silent. Jake moved through the shadows with practiced steps. Sarah carried Hope in her arms, wrapped in a thick scarf. They avoided the guards. Avoided the firelight. Every few steps, Jake turned to look behind them. Hope didn't speak, but her small hand was gripping his shirt tightly. They reached the old fence, half broken near the storage crates. That's where Jake had hidden a small hoverbike earlier, but just before they mounted it, movement. Voices, flashlights. They had been seen. Sarah gasped. Run! Jake grabbed her arm. No time to run, get on. They climbed on. Jake started the engine, but as the lights closed in, Hope turned her face toward them, eyes glowing with silver light. And suddenly, the air trembled. A sharp pulse of invisible energy burst from her. The guards stumbled, screamed, dropped their weapons. Jake stared in shock. What was that? Sarah whispered. The reason they want her. Jake gunned the engine. Then we're not letting them have her. The bike roared into the night. The night air screamed past them as Jake pushed the hoverbike to its limits. The wind pulled at Sarah's cloak as she clung to him, her arms tightly wrapped around their daughter, Hope. The child didn't cry. She held on quietly, her small head resting against her mother's shoulder, like she already understood everything. Behind them, bright lights lit up the darkness. 3 black cruisers shot through the camp's boundary wall. Armed bounty hunters rode inside, shouting over their comms. Target spotted. Human male, alien female, hybrid child. Do not lose them. Jake gritted his teeth. They're faster. We can't go to the city, Sarah said over the wind. They'll block the gates. I know, Jake replied. We're not going to the city. He turned the hoverbike sharply to the right, heading into the canyons. The land changed quickly. Flat desert became broken stone, sharp ridges, and winding trails. The path was dangerous even in daylight. At night, it was almost suicide. But Jake had no choice. Inside the lead cruiser, a cold-eyed alien named Tress sat in the front. He worked for Krez, the black market leader who had learned about Hope's bloodline and wanted to sell her off-world to the highest bidder. Tress wasn't interested in money. He was interested in power. Get me that child, he said into his face, or don't come back at all. Down in the canyon, Jake slowed the bike and killed the engine. The sound of engines echoed above, but he knew it wouldn't last. They'll use thermal sensors, he said. Sarah nodded. Then we move on foot. Jake reached into a side panel of the bike and pulled out a compact scanner jammer. This will buy us 15 minutes. Maybe less. Hope clung to her father now. She hadn't said a word, but her silver eyes stared up at him with quiet trust. Do you remember me? Jake asked softly. The girl tilted her head. Mama says I have your voice in my dreams. Jake blinked, then whispered, I'm sorry I wasn't there. Hope smiled, just a little. You're here now. The 3 of them began to climb up through the narrow rock path. Jake led the way, clearing loose stones, guiding Sarah and Hope by hand. The stars above gave just enough light to see their outlines, but not enough to spot them from the sky. Behind them, the sound of cruiser engines grew distant, then silent. Jake frowned. They've landed. They're tracking on foot, Sarah said, pulling Hope closer. They're hunters, Jake said, but I was trained too. Suddenly, a sharp cry echoed through the canyon. Jake grabbed Sarah and ducked behind a rock ledge. A light drone zipped past overhead, scanning. Then, another one. Jake waited until they passed. He looked at Sarah. If they corner us, I need you to take Hope and run. I'll draw them away. No, Sarah said firmly. We stay together. Jake looked at her. For 8 years I protected her alone, Sarah said. I'm tired of running, but I will not leave you behind now. Jake smiled faintly. You're still the strongest person I've ever met, Sarah replied, and you're still the only human I ever trusted. Suddenly, a red flare shot into the sky. Jake's face tensed. They've spotted us. A deep growl echoed through the canyon. Heavy boots slammed into the rocky path. Tress's men were closing in fast. Jake pulled a small weapon from his belt. "Hide with her." Sierra pulled Hope behind a stone ridge. The child looked up, frightened but brave. Then from around the bend, 3 hunters appeared. Jake stood in their path. They raised their weapons. "I don't want to kill anyone," Jake said calmly, "but you won't take my daughter." "One," Hunter laughed. "She's not yours anymore." Jake didn't wait. He moved. A flash, a kick, a shot to the knee. One down, another swung. Jake ducked, countered, disarmed him. 2 down. The third aimed. But suddenly the rocks trembled. A low hum filled the air. Hope, behind the ridge, was glowing. Her eyes pulsed with silver light. Jake felt the pressure in the air shift, like gravity. Itself was twisting. The last hunter screamed, dropped his weapon, and collapsed unconscious. Jake turned to Sierra. Sierra looked stunned. "She's never done that before," Hope whispered. "They were going to hurt you." Jake stepped forward, knelt down, and gently held her small hand. "Thank you." Hope nodded, breathing heavily. "I'm tired now." Jake picked her up. "We keep moving. There'll be more." As dawn broke over the edge of the cliffs, the family reached an abandoned mining outpost built into the rocks. Jake checked the walls and systems. They were still working. "We'll rest here," he said. Sarah sat beside Hope, who had already fallen asleep. Jake looked out into the canyon, scanning the distance. "They'll come again," he said. "I know," Sarah replied. "But now we're not running alone." Jake nodded. They were a family now, and families don't leave each other behind. The sun had barely risen when Jake stepped out of the old mining shelter. He looked across the cliffs. The wind had changed, colder now, sharper. Ice crusted the rocks in thin sheets. A storm was building in the distance. Inside, Sarah wrapped Hope in a warm blanket made from shredded insulation. The child slept, her face pale but peaceful. Her body had grown weaker since the power burst in the canyon. Her abilities had drained her. Too much energy, too fast. "She needs rest," Sarah whispered. "But it's not safe to stay here long." Jake nodded. "I know. If they track us here, they'll box us in. There's only one way left." Sarah tilted her head. "The North Ridge?" Jake looked at her and nodded. "Through the ice fields." Sarah didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "No one goes that way." Jake crouched beside her and Hope. "We will." By midday they were moving again. The rocky ground turned white with frost. Each breath formed a cloud. The wind cut through their clothes like knives. Jake had rigged heat pads into Hope's coat and tucked her tightly against his chest. Sarah followed close, holding his coat to block the wind from behind. They walked in silence for hours. Every now and then, Jake would stop, scan the horizon, and check their trail. Snow was beginning to fall, slowly at first and then heavier. Sarah broke the silence. She never used to get sick. Jake looked down at Hope, her head resting against his shoulder. "She's not sick. She's recovering." "She's still just a child," Sarah said. "I forget that sometimes." "She's stronger than I was at her age," Jake replied. Sarah smiled faintly. "She's stronger than both of us." As the sun disappeared behind dark clouds, the frozen wasteland opened wide before them. Vast white hills, frozen rivers like broken mirrors, strange shapes half buried in snow, ruins of old outposts and machines, long forgotten. Jake paused. "We'll need shelter before nightfall." "There's nothing out here," Sarah said. "There's something," Jake replied. "I saw it on old maps. A supply bunker from the war. If it's still standing, we'll make it." Behind them, in the canyon, Tress stared at a broken drone screen. "We lost their signal," a hunter said. Tress narrowed his eyes. "They went into the Frostlands." Another hunter shivered. "They'll die out there." Tress turned slowly. "Or maybe they're hoping we think that." He looked to the sky. Send the Sky Scouts. Thermal scan the whole ridge. I want that. Girl. Back in the ice, Jake's legs were growing heavy. Hope stirred in his arms. Her silver eyes blinked open. Is it still night? She whispered. Almost, he replied softly. We're close. Sarah leaned against him for a second, catching her breath. Jake, I see something. There. He turned. Through the snowfall, a small metal tower poked above a rise, part of a bunker. Jake's heart leapt. They hurried to it. Jake brushed off a frozen keypad. Dead. He pulled out a small battery from his tool pack and rewired the lock. The door hissed open. Warm air spilled out. They stepped inside and closed the door behind them. The bunker was small but solid. One main room with faded panels, broken lights, and a working heat unit. Jake laid Hope on a cot. She sighed softly and smiled. Sarah stood beside her, brushing hair from the girl's face. You made her feel safe, she said. Jake sat down, rubbing his sore arms. She makes me feel something I haven't in years. Sarah looked at him. Like what? He hesitated, then said, like I still matter to someone. Sarah sat beside him. You do. You always did. They sat in silence for a while. The sound of the storm outside was like the whispering of ghosts. Hope woke in the middle of the night. She was sweating, her eyes wide. Mama, she whispered. Sarah rushed to her. What is it? Hope pointed at the wall. They're coming. Jake sat up. How do you know? Hope closed her eyes. I saw them. In my head. They're flying. Looking for us. Jake stood. Drones. How far? Sarah asked. Maybe an hour, Hope said. Jake looked out the tiny frost-covered window. A red light blinked in the sky. Less than that. Jake pulled out a flare pistol and 2 energy knives. We can't run. Not again. If they find this bunker, there's nowhere else to go. Sarah looked at him. What do we do? Jake turned toward her. We fight. Sarah's voice was steady. Then I fight with you. Hope sat up slowly. And I help too. Jake knelt in front of her. No, you stay safe. Hope placed her small hand on his. I'll be careful, but I can help. Jake stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. We do this, together. The storm had calmed, but the snow still fell softly over the frozen ridge. Inside the old bunker, Jake checked his weapons one last time. His fingers moved quickly, fixing a damaged grip on his energy knife. Across from him, Sarah wrapped cloth around a metal rod, sharp on one end, heavy on the other. It was crude, but it would do. Hope sat on the cot, hugging her knees. Her silver eyes stared into the dark corners of the room. Her voice was low. They're very close now. Jake turned. How many? Hope blinked. 5. No, 6. One of them is different. Cold inside, not like the others. Tress, Sarah said quietly. He won't stop. Jake looked around the bunker. There's only one door in. We'll hold them there. He walked over to Hope, knelt beside her, and brushed her hair back gently. If anything happens, Hope shook her head. No, we stay together. Jake hesitated, then nodded. Far above the ridge, 2 black scout flyers hovered silently, their lights dim. One dropped low, scanning with thermal sensors. Inside, Tress stared at the glowing image on the screen. There, he said. 3 warm bodies. Bunker. They're in. The pilot glanced back. Should we call for backup? No need, Tress said, standing up and pulling a sleek blade from his belt. They're weak. The child is small, the mother's tired, the humans old. He smiled coldly. I'll kill the parents and take what matters. The moment came just before dawn. The scanner outside the bunker blinked red. Jake stood in front of the door, blade ready. Sarah stood beside him, breathing steady. Hope sat in the corner, hands glowing faintly under her blanket. A loud thud shook the metal door. Jake flinched. "They're here." Another thud, then a sharp hiss as the door began to open. Cold wind rushed in. Silhouettes appeared in the doorway, 5 armored hunters and 1 tall figure in black. Tress. Jake didn't wait. He lunged forward, blade flashing. The first hunter went down with a scream. The others fired stun shots. Jake ducked, rolled, sliced. Sarah charged beside him, striking hard with her makeshift spear. The fight was fast and brutal. Jake's arm was grazed by a blaster shot. Blood poured from the wound, staining the snow-covered floor red. He didn't stop. Tress stepped forward, untouched. He raised his hand, and a crackling whip of dark energy flew from it, striking Sarah and throwing her across the room. She hit, the wall hard, groaning. Jake shouted, turning toward her. Then Tress slammed into him, pinning him against the wall. "Stupid human," Tress hissed. "You think this ends with you?" Jake struggled, but Tress pressed the blade to his neck. Then a whisper filled the air. "Let him go." Hope stood up slowly, her eyes glowing bright silver. Tress laughed. "You? A little freak child?" Hope's hands glowed brighter. The air around her shimmered. Tress raised his weapon. But before he could strike, the room exploded with light. A powerful wave of energy blasted outward. The walls cracked. The hunters screamed and collapsed. Tress stumbled, shielded his face, but it was too late. He flew backward, crashing through the door and into the snow outside. Jake dropped to his knees. Sarah crawled to Hope, pulling her close. "Are you okay?" Hope nodded weakly. "It didn't hurt. It just came out." Jake looked at the hunters, groaning or unconscious, sprawled across the floor. "What did she do?" Sarah stared at him. "She protected us." Suddenly, Jake stood and rushed outside. Snow swirled in the wind. He looked around. Tress was gone. Only a trail of blood led toward the ridge. "He's still alive," Jake said. Sarah came up behind him. "Let him run. He'll be too afraid to come back." Jake didn't move. "He'll want revenge. Then we'll be ready." Jake turned, met her eyes. Sarah reached out and touched his wounded arm gently. "You bled for us," she whispered. Jake chuckled softly. "I'd bleed again." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. "You already have, more than once." Back inside, Hope had fallen asleep, curled beneath a blanket. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Jake sat beside her. "She's different," he said. "Stronger than either of us." Sarah nodded. "She carries both bloodlines, both hearts. She's a bridge between 2 worlds." Jake looked down at the sleeping child. "And now she has a father." Sarah smiled faintly. "And I have someone to stand beside me again." The storm outside passed. The morning light painted the frozen path in gold and silver. Tress, wounded and hiding, stared at the ridge from far away. He would return. Not yet, but someday. Hope's face came to his mind. That power, that light. "She's not just a child," he muttered. "She's a weapon," and he would not forget. But inside the bunker there was only warmth and peace. For the first time, Jake felt what he had been missing all these years. Not just a cause, not just a duty, but a family. And he would protect it no matter what. Snow still clung to the edges of the bunker door, but the storm had passed. Light streamed in through the broken panels in the ceiling. It was quiet now. No engines, no shouts, no threats. Just the soft breathing of a family that had survived. Jake stood outside watching the distant mountains. His arm was bandaged, his body ached, but inside, something unfamiliar had taken root. Peace. For the first time in years, he wasn't running. Not from war, not from duty, not from himself. Inside, Sarah tucked Hope's blanket around her gently. The child was sleeping again, curled, up beside a small heater Jake had fixed with parts from a drone they'd defeated. Her hands, once glowing with strange power, now rested quietly in her lap. Sarah turned to see Jake at the doorway. She joined him in silence. "You think she'll be okay?" Jake asked. Sarah nodded. "Her body needs time, but her spirit is stronger than most grown warriors." Jake gave a small smile. "She didn't flinch, not even once. She takes after you," Sarah said softly. Jake shook his head. "I didn't raise her, I didn't earn that." Sarah looked up at him. "But you're here now, and she knows it. That matters." Later, when Hope woke up, she found Jake sitting beside her, gently sharpening a piece of scrap metal into a toy blade. He looked up, surprised. "You're awake." She nodded, still groggy. "Feeling better?" he asked. Hope reached out and touched his hand. "Your hands are rough," she said with a giggle. Jake laughed. "Too many machines, not enough baths." She looked into his eyes. "You didn't leave. You stayed." Jake's smile faded, but his voice grew warm. "I'm not going anywhere." Hope tilted her head. "Can I call you something?" Jake blinked. "What do you want to call me?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Dad." Jake swallowed the lump in his throat. He nodded slowly. Yeah, you can." The next day, Jake and Sarah stood outside the bunker while Hope played near the snow-covered rocks. Jake looked out over the frozen landscape. "This can't be home forever. She needs safety. A future," Sarah agreed. "I know a place, far east, Hidden Valley. There's an old healing commune there. No one hunts, no one trades lives, just peace. They don't care what species you are." Jake looked at her, hopeful. "Can we make it there?" Sarah smiled. "With you beside us? I believe we can." He smiled back. "Then that's where we'll go." Hope found something in the snow, an old soldier's medallion, half buried. She picked it up, looked at it, then ran back to Jake. "Was this yours?" Jake took it and stared at it. It was his, from years ago. He looked at Sarah. "You kept it?" She nodded. "I buried it outside the night you left. I wanted a piece of you to stay with us." Jake closed his eyes. He hadn't just left behind memories. He'd left behind family. Before they set off, Jake made one last change. He took off the rusted dog tag from around his neck, his only ID from the military, and gave it to Hope. She looked at it, confused. "What's this?" "It used to tell people who I was," Jake said. "But now you don't need it to know that." Hope hugged it to her chest. "It's heavy." Jake smiled. "That's how you know it matters." As they walked through the white wilderness together, the sun broke through the clouds. Hope skipped between them, holding both their hands. Sarah looked at Jake. "You know, I used to dream about this." He smiled. "I didn't, but I think I'll keep dreaming now." She leaned her head on his shoulder as they walked. Jake glanced down at Hope, whose laughter filled the cold air with warmth. And for the first time in a long, long while, Jake didn't feel lost anymore. He felt found. Back at the ridge, Tress stood with a scar across his face, watching from a distance. He would not chase them now, not today, but he would remember. And one day, he might return. But if he did, he wouldn't find a broken woman and a lost child. He would face a father,